The dust from the harmattan wind settled on everything that morning. The chairs, the canopy, even the grief itself seemed covered in a fine layer of orange-brown powder. Adana Mensah knelt beside her father's coffin in the courtyard of their family compound in Accra, her fingers tracing the carved symbols on the mahogany wood. Each symbol told a story. The Sankofa bird, the Dwinaman ram's horns, the Gwy Nyam. Except God. Her father, Kofi Mensah, had insisted on traditional Akan symbols even though he'd built his fortune in modern telecommunications. The slap came without warning. It echoed across the courtyard like a thunderclap, silencing the funeral singer's mid-verse. Adana's head snapped to the side, her cheek burning. Her stepmother, Victoria, stood over her, breathing hard, designer heels sinking into the red earth. "You disgrace us on this day of all days," Victoria hissed in English, though most of the mourners spoke Chui. She always used English when she wanted to sound important. "Bringing that dirty beggar into your father's funeral? Have you no shame?" Adana's hand went to her face, but she didn't stand. She'd learned over the 7 years since her father married Victoria that reactions only made things worse. Instead, she looked toward the compound gate where the old woman still stood, rain-soaked despite the dry season having started weeks ago. The woman's wrapper was torn, her gray hair uncombed, and she leaned heavily on a walking stick that looked like it might snap at any moment. 10 minutes earlier, Adana had been receiving condolences when she noticed the funeral attendants blocking the gate. Through the iron bars, she could see the old woman pleading to enter. The security men shook their heads firmly. Behind them, distant relatives and business associates glanced over, then quickly away. The universal gesture of "not my problem." Adana had excused herself from a long-winded cousin and walked to the gate. The old woman's eyes were clouded with cataracts, but something about her posture suggested she saw more than most. "Please, I knew Kofi when he was still selling phone card from a wooden table at Makola Market," the woman said. "I want to pay my respects." The security guard scoffed. "Do you have an invitation?" "Sister, let her in," Adana said quietly, opening the gate herself. Now, kneeling in the dirt with her face stinging, Adana wondered if kindness was always meant to cost this much. Victoria turned to address the crowd, her hand pressed dramatically to her chest. "Forgive my stepdaughter. Grief makes people forget their place." Adana stood then, slowly, not in defiance, but because her knees hurt and the performance was over. She was 28 years old, held a master's degree in business administration from the University of Ghana, and had spent 6 years watching her father build an empire while pretending she wasn't invisible in her own family home. She looked at the coffin one last time before walking to the back of the courtyard where the caterers had set up. The old woman sat alone on a plastic chair, untouched plate of jollof rice balanced on her lap. Adana sat beside her without speaking. "Your father was a good man," the old woman said after a while. "Even when he became rich, he remembered where he came from." "Did he?" Adana asked, genuinely curious. The woman smiled, revealing gaps where teeth used to be. "You think he didn't?" "Child, half the people here owe their first business loan to your father. They just don't talk about it, because pride is easier than gratitude." Adana absorbed this. Her father had been a quiet man, more comfortable with spreadsheets than conversations. After her mother died, when Adana was 15, he'd retreated further into his work, building his telecommunications company from a small mobile money operation to a multinational corporation with ventures in 6 African countries. When he brought Victoria home 3 years after her mother's death, a woman 15 years younger than him, beautiful and ambitious, Adana had hoped for connection. Instead, she got carefully orchestrated distance. Business decisions made behind closed doors. Family meetings she wasn't invited to. A slow, methodical erasure. The funeral continued around them. High-life music played softly from speakers. People ate and drank and told stories about Kofi Mensah, the legend, the visionary, the man who'd brought mobile banking to rural Ghana. Nobody mentioned Kofi Mensah, the father who'd worked 16-hour days and fallen asleep at dinner. Nobody mentioned the man who'd watched his only daughter graduate university from a video call because a board meeting ran late. As sunset approached, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the old woman stood to leave. She gripped Adana's hand with surprising strength. "You are more like him than you know," she said. "The test is never when people are watching. It's when nobody would blame you for walking away." Adana didn't understand, but something in the woman's clouded eyes suggested she wasn't supposed to. Not yet. 3 days later, the summons came via email. Not a request, a summons. All interested parties were to appear at the offices of Kwame and Associates, her father's legal firm, for the reading of the will. The message included a line that made Adana's stomach tighten. Attendance is mandatory for verification of inheritance eligibility. The law office occupied the 10th floor of a glass tower in Accra's financial district. Adana arrived early out of habit, wearing the same black dress from the funeral because it seemed appropriate, and she didn't have the energy to choose something else. Victoria was already there, commanding the room in a way she perfected over the years. She wore white, mourning colors in their culture, but her version of white came from a designer boutique in Johannesburg and probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her lawyer, a nervous man named Kwabena who'd worked for her father's company, sat beside her shuffling papers. "Adana," Victoria said, nodding coldly. "Not stepdaughter, not dear, just a name dropped like a stone in water." Adana took a seat across the long conference table. The folder in front of her had her name printed in crisp letters. She didn't open it. Other people filed in, distant cousins who'd never visited, business partners who'd golfed with her father, a few executives from the company board. 12 people total, all of them looking at each other like chess players studying the board. Then the door opened, and everything shifted. The old woman from the funeral walked in, except she wasn't using the walking stick anymore. She moved with purpose, upright and steady, wearing a sharp navy suit that spoke of money and power. Behind her came a younger man, carrying a briefcase, his expression unreadable. The room went silent. Victoria recovered first, though her voice came out higher than usual. "What is this? Who let her in?" The old woman, not old at all now, Adana realized, maybe 60 but vital and alert, took the seat at the head of the table. "My name is Alma Osei," she said, her voice clear and commanding. "I'm a senior executor of the Kofi Mensah Estate Trust. For the past 7 years, I've been documenting the character and choices of everyone in this room." "This is absurd." Victoria stood up. "Kwabena, do something." The nervous lawyer wouldn't meet her eyes. "Mrs. Mensah, Mr. Mensah put these provisions in place 18 months ago. It's all legal." Alma opened the briefcase and removed a tablet. "Your husband believed that wealth reveals character, but only when there's nothing to gain from kindness. He wanted to know who among you would choose right when it cost you something." She tapped the screen. Around the table, phones began buzzing simultaneously. Notification after notification. Adana's phone lit up. Asterisk account status update. Authorization change. Board access granted. Asterisk. Kwabena's face went pale as he scrolled through his phone. "Victoria, your corporate accounts. They're all frozen." "Frozen?" Victoria's voice cracked. "What do you mean frozen?" "All privileges suspended," Alma said calmly. "Pending review of expenditures and decisions made over the past 7 years." She slid a document across the table, not to Victoria, but to Adana. Adana's hands shook as she picked it up. The first page wasn't numbers or legal terminology. It was a letter in her father's handwriting. "Asterisk, my daughter. If you're reading this, then you passed a test I created because I was too afraid to simply trust. I watched you for years. How you carried yourself when I wasn't looking, how you treated people who couldn't help your career, how you chose dignity over drama, even when it cost you. Victoria brought ambition into my life when I needed it, but you brought something I'd almost forgotten. Integrity." The old woman at the gate? That was Alma, my most trusted advisor. She's been watching all of you. The empire I built started with nothing but a phone and a dream. I'm giving it to someone who understands that power is responsibility, not privilege. Asterisk. Adana's vision blurred. She set the letter down carefully. Around her, chaos erupted. Fullness hung. People shouted questions. Victoria's lawyer kept saying, "This can't be legal," like a broken record. Alma waited until the noise died down. The Mensa Empire Trust is now under new management. Adana Mensa has been granted majority control, effective immediately. The transition documents are being filed as we speak. Victoria turned to Adana, eyes wild. "You knew. You had to have known." Adana shook her head slowly. "I knew my father. That's all. Don't lie to me." Victoria's composure shattered completely. This whole thing was planned. The old woman, the gate, the slap. You manipulated everything. Planning requires intent, Adana said quietly. "I just showed up." The meeting dissolved. People left in clusters, already forming alliances and grievances. Alma remained seated, watching Adana with an expression that wasn't quite satisfaction. "Your father wanted me to give you something else," Alma said when they were alone. She handed over a small brass key. His private office in the old building where he started. The one he never let anyone else use. He said you'd know what to do with what you found there. That night, Adana sat in her small apartment in OSU, the same neighborhood where she'd grown up before her father's fortune exploded. She'd refused to move into the family mansion after her father married Victoria. Distance had been her only form of control. Now distance was disappearing. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Executives requesting meetings. Lawyers needing signatures. News outlets wanting statements. She turned it off and stared at the brass key in her palm. The weight of what had happened hadn't hit her yet. Or maybe it had, and she was just refusing to feel it. Her father had built an empire worth $500 billion across telecommunications, mobile banking, real estate, and renewable energy. Companies in Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, Ethiopia, Senegal, and South Africa. Thousands of employees, millions of customers. And he'd given it to her because she'd opened a gate. No, Adana quería herself. Because of who she'd been when nobody was watching. All those years of small choices, helping the janitor carry boxes, mentoring younger employees without credit, reviewing contracts carefully even when everyone else rushed through them. She thought nobody noticed. Her father had noticed everything. Sleep didn't come easily. When it did, she dreamed of the funeral, but in the dream, she hesitated at the gate. In the dream, she walked away from the old woman and returned to the safety of not causing a scene. She woke at 3 a.m. with her heart racing, unsure which version was worse. The reality where kindness led to inheritance, or the dream where silence led to peace. The next morning, Victoria's world continued its collapse. Her driver didn't show up. Her credit cards were declined at the salon. The security guard at the mansion, the same mansion Adana had never moved into, asked for authorization before letting her through. By noon, the story had leaked to the media. Asterisk Telecom heiress emerges in surprise succession. Kofi Mensa's daughter assumes control of $500 billion empire. Asterisk. Adana spent the day in meetings she didn't ask for, making decisions she wasn't sure she was ready to make. Alma guided her through the basics, board structures, fiduciary duties, immediate priorities. The company needed stability. Markets needed confidence. Employees needed reassurance. "You don't have to decide everything today," Alma said during a break. "Your father built this over 30 years. You have time." Doi. Adana gestured to the stack of contracts on the desk. "Every decision affects thousands of people. If I mess up, you will mess up." Alma interrupted gently. "That's guaranteed. The question is what you do after." At 6 p.m., Adana's phone rang from a number she recognized. She answered on the second ring. "I want to talk." Victoria's voice came through, stripped of its usual commanding tone. "About what?" "You destroyed me." The words came out flat, empty of fight. "And you did it so quietly. That's worse than if you'd been cruel." Adana closed her eyes. "You weren't destroyed. You were corrected." Silence stretched between them, heavy with 7 years of tension. "Did you want this?" Victoria asked finally, and for the first time, she sounded afraid. Adana thought about that. "I don't know yet." The call ended. Adana sat in the empty conference room long after, phone still in her hand, facing a truth she hadn't expected. Power answered questions she'd never asked, and now she had to live with the answers. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of board meetings, media training, and late nights reviewing documents that revealed how the empire actually worked. Amma stayed close, translating corporate speak and pointing out landmines disguised as opportunities. Adana discovered things that made her stomach turn. Shell companies funneling money through subsidiaries in Mauritius and the Seychelles. Contract awarded to Victoria's relatives at inflated prices. Her cousin's construction firm had built 3 office complexes at twice the market rate. Employees fired to make quarterly numbers look better, their severance packages negotiated down through legal technicalities. One file particularly bothered her. A rural connectivity program her father had championed, bringing mobile banking to farmers in the northern region, had been quietly defunded 3 years ago. The budget had been redirected to a luxury office renovation in Victoria's name. 200 villages that were supposed to get service centers never received them. The money disappeared into marble floors and imported furniture. Adana spent an entire night reading through employee termination files. Each one had a name, a photograph from their ID badge, a reason for dismissal. Redundancy due to structural optimization. Position eliminated in efficiency review. Corporate language designed to hide human cost. She found herself memorizing names. Kwame Asani, 23 years with the company, terminated at 58, 3 years before pension eligibility. Fua Boateng, single mother of 4, let go after her department was consolidated. Yao Se, who'd won an innovation award 2 months before his position was eliminated. You can't save everyone, Amma said one night, finding Adana still at her desk at 2 a.m. The guilt will destroy you before you fix anything. Then what do I do with it? Adana asked. All this anger at what was done in my father's name? You make different choices going forward, Amma replied. And you accept that some damage can't be completely undone. But Adana wasn't ready to accept that. Not yet. Her first board meeting as chairwoman felt like walking into a freezer. The conference room was all glass and steel, designed to intimidate. 20 executives watched her take the seat at the head of the table, her father's seat, and she could feel their skepticism like a physical weight. Amma stood to present the first item, a financial review of the past 5 years. Charts appeared on the screens around the room, stripping away the corporate language to show what had really happened. Restructures that eliminated departments. Budget cuts that ended community programs. Money redirected into ventures that benefited a select few. A senior VP cleared his throat. These decisions were approved through proper channels. Everything was within legal parameters. Legal isn't the same as right, Adana said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. Silence filled the room. How many people lost their jobs during these restructures? She asked. Amaçıket her tablet. Approximately 3,000 directly. Many more indirectly through vendor contracts and service reductions. Adana nodded once. Bring them back. Confusion rippled through the room like a wave. That would require reversing 5 years of operational restructuring, the CFO said carefully. The cost alone. I understand the cost, Adana interrupted. Do it anyway. Mrs. Mensah, with respect, the markets won't. Stop. Adana held up one hand. My father built this company to connect people, not extract from them. We're going back to that vision. Draft the rehiring plan. I want to see it by Friday. After the meeting, Amma walked with her down the hallway, overlooking the city. From this height, Accra looked beautiful. The Atlantic Ocean meeting the skyline, roads ribboning through neighborhoods, life moving in patterns too complex to fully understand. You could have left things as they were, Amma said. Nobody would have blamed you. The company is profitable. Adana leaned against the glass. That's the problem. Nobody was questioning whether profitable meant right. Ama sutu diter. Your father used to say pressure reveals truth. Pressure also breaks things, Adana replied. Things that were never meant to carry this much weight. 3 months later, Adana stood in a warehouse in Tima that had sat empty for 2 years. Now it hummed with activity again. Workers refurbishing mobile money kiosks, loading trucks, planning distributions to rural communities. The rehiring initiative had brought back over 2,000 people so far. The warehouse smelled of fresh paint and motor oil. Forklifts moved between rows of equipment. In one corner, technicians tested refurbished point-of-sale systems. In another, a training session was underway, teaching returning employees about new software updates they'd missed during their time away. Adana walked through slowly, Alma beside her. She watched a woman in her 40s carefully wrapping tablets in protective covering. The woman's name tag read, Akojua Minsa. No relation, just a common surname. She worked with practiced efficiency, her hands moving in patterns that spoke of years of experience. How long has she been back? Adana asked. Amachikit her tablet. 2 weeks. She was one of the first rehires. Worked here for 12 years before the layoffs. Adana approached the woman. Excuse me. Akojua. The woman looked up, startled. Recognition flashed across her face when she realized who was speaking to her. She started to stand, but Adana gestured for her to stay seated. I just wanted to thank you for coming back, Adana said. Akojua's eyes filled with tears. Ma'am, you don't understand. When I lost this job, I couldn't pay my daughter's school fees. She had to drop out of secondary school for a year. We almost lost our home. The words hit Adana like a physical blow. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that happened. But she's back in school now, Akojua continued, wiping her eyes. Because you gave us another chance. My daughter wants to study computer science. She says she's going to work here someday, like her mother. A man in coveralls approached them, wiping grease from his hands. They told us you brought us back, that we have our jobs again. Adana nodded, her throat tight. He hesitated. What? The question landed heavier than gratitude would have. Behind him, other workers had stopped what they were doing, watching, waiting for her answer. Because it was wrong, Adana said. What happened before? It was wrong. He smiled, not grateful, relieved. That's rare. Somebody just saying that without a whole speech attached. Before leaving, Adana gathered the warehouse supervisors. I want to know if anyone's still struggling. Medical bills, school fees, catching up on rent. Set up a hardship fund. Anonymous applications. No questions asked beyond verifying need. How much should we budget? One supervisor asked. Whatever it takes, Adana said. These people kept this company running for years. We owe them more than just their jobs back. That night, Adana finally used the brass key her father had left her. The old building where he'd started his business stood in a neighborhood that gentrification hadn't reached yet. Children played soccer in the street. Women sold kanki and fish from wooden stalls. The building itself needed paint, but the structure was solid. The office on the second floor was exactly as he'd left it. A simple desk, shelves full of accounting ledgers from before everything went digital, and a locked drawer. Inside the drawer was a notebook with her name on the first page, written in her father's careful handwriting. Adana read until sunrise. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a confession. It was a record. Observations about people he trusted, doubts about decisions he'd made, plans within plans. One entry stopped her completely. Asterisk if you're reading this. Adana, then you've passed a test I created because I was too afraid to simply trust you. I watched you choose dignity over revenge, patience over drama, kindness over strategy. I watched you become the person I should have been. I'm giving you the empire because you're the only one who might remember it should serve people, not the other way around. I hope I was wrong to think this test was necessary. I'm afraid I wasn't. Asterisk. Adana closed the notebook. For the first time since the will reading, something inside her cracked. Not breaking, just shifting. Pressure behind her eyes she refused to name. The next morning, Victoria appeared at the office. No warning, just there when Adana arrived. She looked different, thinner, hair pulled back simply, no designer labels. Reduced, but not defeated. Adjusted. Security had called ahead, asking if they should let her up. Adana had said yes. Now they sat across from each other in Adana's office. The same office that used to belong to her father, still decorated with his certificates and awards. Victoria stared at a photograph on the wall. Kofi Mensah cutting the ribbon at the opening of the company's first rural service center. "I'm in that picture," Victoria said quietly. "Just behind him to the left. You can barely see me, but I'm there. I helped plan that opening. Coordinated the whole thing." Adana looked closer and saw it was true. A younger Victoria in a cream dress, holding a clipboard. "I loved him," Victoria continued. "Maybe not the way you wanted me to. Maybe not the way your mother did. But I loved what we were building together. The power, yes, but also the impact. We were changing things." And then, Adana asked. Victoria's hands tightened in her lap. Then he started pulling away. "Stopped asking my opinion. Stopped including me in decisions. I thought if I could prove myself essential, if I could streamline operations, cut costs, make the numbers irresistible, he'd see me again. Really see me." "So you fired 3,000 people to get his attention?" "No," Victoria said sharply. Then softer, "I fired 3,000 people because I convinced myself that's what he wanted. Efficiency, profitability, results. I told myself I was protecting his legacy. But you were protecting your position," Adana said. Victoria nodded slowly. By the end, I couldn't tell the difference anymore. Silence settled between them. Outside the window, across traffic hummed. Hundreds of thousands of people moving through their lives, unaware that in this room, two women were untangling 7 years of damage. "You won," Victoria said finally. "But don't pretend you didn't want to." Adana set down her pen. "I didn't want this. I wanted my father to see me, to acknowledge that I existed as more than just his biological daughter, to ask my opinion about something, anything that mattered to him. And now I have to decide what to do with being seen." Victoria studied her for a long moment. "You know what the hardest part is? You're better at this than I ever was. And you're doing it without trying." "That's not true," Adana said quietly. "I'm trying every day. I'm just trying to build something that lasts without destroying people in the process." Victoria stood to leave, then paused at the door. Her hand rested on the frame, and Adana noticed for the first time how much older she looked. Not in years, but in weight carried. "You think that's possible?" Victoria asked. "Building without destroying?" "I have to," Adana replied. "Because if it's not possible, then my father's entire legacy is just a monument to controlled damage. And I refuse to believe that's all he left behind." Victoria's lips trembled like she might say something more. Instead, she nodded once and left. Adana sat alone in the office for a long time after, staring at the photograph on the wall. Her father's smile. Victoria barely visible in the background. And between them, the ribbon-cutting ceremony celebrating something that had seemed so simple then, bringing services to people who needed them. When had it gotten so complicated? After Victoria left, Adana stood at the window, overlooking the city. The Mensah empire was stable now. Audits were clean. Employees were returning. Community programs were being restored. By every measure, she'd succeeded. But success felt different than she'd imagined. Heavier. More complicated. She'd inherited an empire and displaced a woman who'd tried to claim it through marriage and manipulation. She corrected systemic injustices, but created new hardships for executives who'd benefited from the old system. She'd passed a test she never agreed to take. And in the quiet that followed, in the space between decisions and their consequences, she understood something her father might have known all along. Power doesn't ask what kind of person you want to be. It shows you who you already are, then makes you live with that truth in front of everyone. 18 months after the funeral, Adana started something new. Not through the trust, not under her name. A legal aid network for workers displaced by corporate restructuring they never controlled. It ran quietly, efficiently, without fanfare. Alma warned her it would never scale to match the problems it addressed. "That's not the point," Adana said. "The point is remembering that every decision affects real people, not just balance sheets." On the anniversary of her father's death, Adana returned to the compound where they'd held the funeral. The same courtyard, the same red earth. She sat where she'd knelt when Victoria's hand had connected with her face and tried to remember the exact weight of that moment. The simplicity, The clarity of not knowing what came next. She couldn't. Memory had been edited by consequence, revised by the knowledge of what that single choice had set in motion. Her phone buzzed with an alert. Asterisk Q4 earnings exceed projections. Stakeholder confidence at historic high. Asterisk. She turned it off and sat in the quiet. The empire endured. What she would become within it, whether she would be crushed by its weight or shaped into someone capable of carrying it with grace, remained unwritten. But for the first time since inheriting everything, Adana understood that the test hadn't ended at the funeral gate. The test was every day, every decision, every moment when she chose between what was easy and what was right. And unlike her father's test, this one didn't have a fixed endpoint or a clear passing grade. It just continued, one choice at a time, until the weight either broke her or revealed what she was truly made of. The Harmattan wind picked up, carrying red dust across the courtyard. Adana stood, brushed off her dress, and went back to work.